living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John. This SPEDTalk.
Welcome to SPED Talk with Pam,
and John,
also known as The Calm.
before the storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible.
Well, Pam, what did you think about that ride up to the 14th floor at Booty Bank? I don't think I've ever been up this high.
I don't think we're allowed to go up this high, but hey, we're here today.
We are here today, and we're here with two awesome guests. And in the room, we have Jacob Klett, and he is a review and support manager for the review and support division here in this Department of Special Education at TEA. And we have Ramonda Olaloye on Zoom with us. Ramonda from Houston, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yay, I'm so excited.
So, John, what are we going to be talking about today?
That's a good question. Didn't you? I thought you were going to make a script or something.
No, I think Jake was going to really take the lead on this.
Oh, I guess I failed my homework assignment.
I think that's okay. I bet we'll figure it out. Amy, do you have the script that you gave me? Oh,
Okay.
okay. So we're going to be shooting from the hip here.
Okay.
So this is going to be unedited. This is going to be raw. This is going to be honest. And we hope to share with our listeners just a little bit of insight about some of the big things going on here at the Texas Education Agency and how we are really making things happen for students with disabilities across our state, how we are redefining what we consider to be effective, quality special education, and really, you know, what are some of the changes that we're seeing out in local schools regarding some of the changes in policies and approaches here in the agency. So,
Yeah, and also, I think the buzzword for this last month has been, the buzzwords are self-assessment. And so,
right.
Jacob,
Okay.
or Ramonda, can you fill us in on what's going on with this thing we hear about self-assessments?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you probably know, we are part of the Division of Review and Support here at the Texas Education Agency, and we've been working to bring the strategic plan to life and improve the quality of special education services and monitoring of special education around the state. And over the last year, we've developed a framework called the Differentiated Monitoring and Support System. And one of the new elements of that system is the self-assessment that you just asked about. And so the self-assessment really, we wanted to create a tool that was supportive of LEA's, local education agencies' efforts around continuous improvement. We wanted to help provide them a pathway for reflection and recognize that we wanted to have our districts and our charter schools have an avenue to think about what are the strengths, what's working in their program, how are they serving students with disabilities in a positive way, and what are some of those areas where they still want to focus their efforts on growth and improvement. So one of the most important things in my mind about the self-assessment is it's not a compliance tool.
Okay.
It really is focused on helping our district leadership teams, our local education agency leadership teams reflect on their systems, reflect on their practices, and identify ways to continue to improve services for children with disabilities.
Okay. So, Ramonda, Jacob mentioned the word team. So what are you envisioning, or TA's envisioning, that an LEA or what an LEA team would look like?
So definitely when we're looking at the LEA, and one of the unique characteristics of review and support is that the majority of our team were actually practitioners within an LEA. So we're able to bring to the table the inner workings of an LEA, what that means as far as working with administrators and teachers, ensuring that they understand the rules and the guidance of special education. But we're also able to take what we need to do with the agency and provide those intensive supports to LEAs that focus on instruction and really creating a culture of academic excellence for all students while maintaining and improving upon compliance with state and federal special education regulations. So really just providing a supportive plan of action and providing succinct, sustainable, ongoing training, monitoring, and processes to balance statewide instructional initiatives and compliance requirements.
I love that, Ramonda, and I love your last name, by the way. So you are quite welcome. So let me just say, what I'm hearing, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is so the self-assessment piece it's a pathway to reflection for LEAs, and it's maybe diagnostic but not punitive. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of framing that. It is diagnostic, and actually all of the tools that we've developed within our differentiated monitoring and support system are aligned to a diagnostic framework.
Okay.
So as we were kind of thinking about how we approach this work of supporting our local education agencies with improving their special education program, and then also keeping in mind our general supervision obligations as the state agency, we wanted to really focus on, what are those really critical elements of implementation from federal and state statute, and how can we really effectively look at the programs in a respective LEA and provide them with the kind of high quality guidance and recommendations. And so we developed this diagnostic framework that really looks at the implementation of special education outcomes for students with disabilities, and then involvement with families and parents of children with disabilities as those three critical lenses. So those are the lenses that the self-assessment focuses on, as well as all of the monitoring and support tools that we've developed.
Ramonda, if you would respond to that, how is this different from maybe prior forms of monitoring and in prior years of the agencies, wanting to impact outcomes and wanting to, but kind of being more compliance focused? What's different?
I really feel like this is providing the state and district leaders to take ownership and invest in improving instruction across our state. I think that we are messaging that there will be high expectations for students with disabilities and effective instruction designed to help those students meet the expectations. I really feel like with the differentiated monitoring system and the wonderful tools such as the self-assessment will actually require the full involvement of all stakeholders to actually actively participate in the learning process of our kids. And I definitely believe that we have that practice of where there is unity, there is strength to promote focus, to increase student achievement among this group of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing about the self-assessment is that this is going to be an annual event. How about that?
Process.
Annual process, which is new especially for monitoring, because typically you do it once and
you're done, you file away.
But that's not the intent of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recognize that when we're thinking about continuous improvement and growth, that it's not a fixed process, right? So it's not a one and done. We do this self-assessment. It's a snapshot in time, and then we kind of move on to the next thing. But if we're really going to support and build continuous improvement and support that mindset around continuous improvement, it has to be an ongoing process. And so that's really the intention behind asking our LEAs to complete a self-assessment on an annual basis. It's that constant cycle of reflection. Once we set the goal and we work toward the goal, how do we, monitor that and come back around and say, this is what we did really well and we made some progress, but maybe we're not quite where we want to be yet. So this is what it's going to look like in the next year. And that's really an ongoing process.
So you mentioned the 3 areas. Could you mention that again?
Yeah,
Just in case
absolutely.
our listeners didn't get them.
So our diagnostic framework is encompassed by 3 primary domains, which is implementation, student outcomes, and family engagement.
So looking at implementation, family engagement, and I lost the
Student outcomes.
student outcome, the most important one.
I just know that because I'm writing it down.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not.
I got you, girl.
I know, I tell you, short-term memory is getting really bad here. So what would you want an LEA to know? Because those are not uncommon, those areas are not uncommon, but they're very important. So from the agency perspective, what do you think LEAs really should be thinking about when their teams get together to look at those areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Ramonda, I know that you've been really looking at the linkage between the self-assessment and creating that strategic support plan. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So what we want LEAs how we want this to be a fluid process, and really looking at the 3 domains of the framework: implementation, student outcomes, family engagement. It touches every aspect of a child's learning process while they're in school. And so when we're looking at the continuous improvement efforts, we want it to be a multidisciplinary, collaborative team where you're bringing people from curriculum and instruction, you're bringing people from special education. Everyone is coming together and looking at programs, because students receiving special education services within a district can also sit in your ESL bilingual classes. They are enrolled in CTE courses. So everyone needs to have a seat at the table to discuss program effectiveness and identify those critical elements that need to be prioritized within an LEA to make improvements with student outcomes. And just ensure their goals and the expectations for achievement within the LEA.
That's great. I love how y'all are connecting those areas and trying to get, it seems like for years we focused in special ed of wanting to get our seat at the table in some ways, if you talk kind of from a metaphorical perspective. But now it's almost like we're at a table and we're trying to bring others into that conversation, like having just the right people around the table, maybe at an ARD meeting that can actually advocate for the child. But now in the planning and reflective process, we're trying to get the same people around the table to take deeper looks at how to impact in these different domain areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really important about what you just said is, thinking about, my own experience prior to coming to TEA. I was a district special education administrator for a few years. And as I, talked to my colleagues in different areas, departments, and different campuses, it was very clear that we all shared common goals.
Right.
We all wanted to see all of our students be successful.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes we developed similar initiatives with similar goals, but we weren't talking to each other about those initiatives. And so it's really critical, and the self-assessment is one component of this, and the strategic support plan as well, of trying to help our LEAs bring staff together, identify those common goals and strategies, and make sure that we're really on the same page in how we support and promote student outcomes.
So let me ask a question. I know that recently in Region 12 we did a training on the self-assessment, and it felt to me like, as the directors we had there in cycles 1 and 2, and we were able to bring some in from 3 because we had a fewer number to actually share that with. It felt like once they saw the platform itself and got to get into the little sandbox, that Ascend has created, even though it's not in Teal yet, but I could see the anxiety level in the room come down a little bit, because I think so much of what we do as adults is that change of learning new things is what's going to be required of me, and then will I be able to perform this task adequately? So I felt like collectively in the room of the folks that we were supporting, the room felt like, oh, okay, we can do this. And that our more robust conversation was around now. How does this not become another thing that special ed directors do? How do we get the right people around the table in each of our systems so that this can be purposeful and meaningful and really and truly go deeper than just the compliance part of completing the self-assessment, but actually inform our practice?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think what's interesting to me, just to kind of go back a little bit, last spring we actually had the opportunity to pilot some of these new tools and processes that we've developed. So we partnered with eight local education agencies in the state who volunteered to work with us and provide us feedback. And at that point in time, we didn't have the platform that you had mentioned built out. The self-assessment wasn't an online tool. It was just a printable PDF. And so we, in setting up the pilot and working with those LEAs, we had talked about, guidance on the self-assessment and the importance of bringing, different folks from different disciplines to the table. And so our pilot LEAs actually engaged in that work and brought, staff from various disciplines to the table to have those self-reflective conversations about different aspects of the self-assessment. And what we found in our feedback in the survey that we did at the end was that 93% of the participants, at least those who took the survey, told us that they really valued the opportunity to complete the self-assessment in that way, and that they found it to be a useful tool. So we'll, continue to be promoting that mindset and supporting LEAs and bringing people to the table as we really hit the ground running in this first year with the differentiated monitoring system.
So with the self-assessment, you're utilizing a rubric. And so could you explain the 3 areas on the rubric as far as developing proficient?
Okay, sure.
That's what I'm going. Okay.
Yeah, so thinking about the self-assessment, yes, as you mentioned, there's a rubric. There's 3 areas where the LEA can self-rate themselves in across 27 different compliance and strategy items. And those areas are developing, proficient, and exemplary. And so what we're encouraging LEAs to do is to identify different sources of evidence, different data sources that they already collect within their respective LEA. In the platform, we generate a list of possible sources of evidence that they might refer to for each item. But there's always, obviously, innovation in practice, and we want to encourage LEAs to, look at the things that they find useful. And so in looking at those sources of evidence, they can really use that rubric to determine what their current practice looks like. So is it something that they're still building it out? They're still really, there's some components of it maybe that are pretty strong, and then some areas where they're still working on building in or still doing research, and that's really the kind of that developing area. And then proficient really is where, the LEA is looking at sources of evidence, and they really feel like this is an area that they're doing really well. They're seeing really positive outcomes for students. They've done, effective trainings with their staff, and those things are pretty solidly in place. And then exemplary is really, taking it to the next level, not just bringing in maybe, the foundational staff, but involving, other roles and bringing folks together across the LEA, just as an example.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about that self-assessment tool and the platform being Ascend, and I know that there's been a lot of information out there how directors in the first 2 cycles will go in and download that app in Teal, the Ascend app, and then at some point then the self-assessment tool will become live within the app, and then they will actually be able to go in and kind of complete that there. But for schools that aren't in cycle 1 and 2, that are in cycles 3, and then really the rest of the state, what and beyond. That's right, Amy, that's right. So what can they expect as far as timing and when they should really turn their attention to trying to download the Ascend platform, trying to begin their work?
Yeah, great question. So, obviously, so we're working with a developer to build out the software application called Ascend Texas. And the Ascend Texas application is really going to be that central hub for the differentiated monitoring and support activities. Self-assessment's one of them, but we'll also, as we engage in monitoring activities, be asking selected LEAs to upload documentation through the Ascend platform. And so obviously there's a change management component in introducing a new software system and helping everybody kind of get on board with that. So we'll be providing some future guidance so this year, 2019, 2020, as we've kind of touched on, we have a cyclical monitoring schedule set up in 3 groups. So we have an October to November group that's coming up here, and then a January to March group and an April to June group. So those first 2 groups this year are our test groups. We're helping them get access to the Ascend platform, and we'll be collecting feedback on their experience with the self-assessment and with the platform, and then really working with our developer to fine-tune that system so that it's really solid for group 3 and then beyond the rollout to the next school year. And so what users can expect then is a user-friendly platform that has embedded tutorials that really is pretty straightforward and allows them to do the data entry they need and get support as they need it. There will be a system of requesting access to that up front, but once users have access to the platform, that's really a one-time deal. Once they request that access, they're good to go. And so, doing that self-assessment as an annual continuous improvement activity, once we get them in the system and get them started with that, should be good to go.
Okay. So Ramonda, still there with us? Okay, great. I'm going to shift subject just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. So one question that keeps coming up is, so with the self-assessment, also with PBMAS, and then now with result-driven accountability, how does all this work together?
That's a great question as well. So with the results-driven accountability and PBMAS and with the self-assessment, all of it is going to continue to be a fluid process and a look at the data. When we're looking at results-driven accountability, we're going to add some additional indicators that we as a state we need to look at so we can increase those student outcomes for our children. With the self-assessment, again, being a reflective piece, looking at your data that you are going to receive from PBMAS and results-driven accountability when it's proposed and accepted, you're going to continue to be reflective upon the practices that are occurring within your district. So it's going to all mesh together to provide a more holistic view of what's actually happening in the district and giving districts, leadership teams an opportunity to disaggregate the data and really drill down to the root causes and identify those critical elements that we need to work on. It's identifying the areas of growth and then really being strategic and targeted with how do we develop these programs? How do we develop these activities to make them meaningful and relevant and increase those outcomes for our students by looking at our data and then putting some very strategic activities and strategies in play in order to improve those programs for our kids.
Oh.
So Ramonda, so I like that. So the PBMAS, right? We know that as an acronym, the performance-based monitoring, the system we used to use now we're kind of now moving into, or we are in RDA, results-driven accountability. So, in my brain, the way I connect these two, like to me, in some ways, the self-assessment is the crosswalk in some ways in our processes and our thoughts from the PBMAS process and systems to the RDA systems, which is in the self-assessment, we want to go beyond compliance and really look at outcomes. This is a way for you to think through theoretically how to do so. So maybe it's kind of a cross learning walk to RDA. Is that maybe fair to say?
I think that is a good way to look at it, because when we do think about PBMAS or PBMOS, we do think about, okay, these are the things that I have to work on to move me from a performance level 3 to a performance level 1 or 2, and it's strictly about compliance. But we have to go beyond that to have a very good balance between compliance and then student achievement.
Mm-hmm.
So using the self-assessment as a crosswalk to really kind of be reflective in an LEA makes sense. It's really shifting that mindset from when you're dealing with the state agency, they're only focused on compliance, whereas we have to be focused on compliance because we have state and federal regulations that we have to meet. But the most important thing also that we need to concern ourselves with is whether or not our students are making growth.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, what is it that we can do as a state agency as well as a district to change our instructional practices, to change our program structures and systems to increase our students' learning? So using the self-assessment as a crosswalk, an evaluative or reflective type of tool is a good way to look at it, and a cross between going from that compliance mindset to that really balanced, looking at the child as a whole and focusing on student learning with knowing that you still have compliance requirements to meet, right?
Yeah.
What I liked about it, Ramonda, this is Amy, and I just wanted to say, really those performance categories are so helpful, because I think what we don't get a lot of times is what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
And so it really allows the district or the individual to look at their current practices and really see it in 3 different categories. And if you aren't where you need to be, then you actually get to see where you need to go. And we haven't had that in any form that I can think of to actually operationalize and apply how we're going to get there, that roadmap. And so I really, that really hit home to me, because I think a lot of times people just need to know, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that one of the things with the differentiated monitoring system and the rubric that is going to be used for the self-assessment, it does operationalize what it looks like. But I also think that it takes away the punitive or the negative connotations of being staged, and it's really looking at your performance level. And even with when you go into the targeted supports, it's still that supportive language. It's not negative connotations. It's really trying to build that partnership and that collaboration. So really, I think what we tried to do with the new monitoring system is take away that negative connotation and really give some concrete and foundational information to LEAs, so there won't be any misinterpretations, and you don't have a clear pathway of getting to where you want to be with your program.
Well, because hopefully you're going to have those practitioners and team members that are from various disciplines, and I think it just gives a common place to have those conversations. And I was really excited about it when I trained on it, and listening to the conversations.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the unique things about this team, and I really love being on this team. I always tell Jacob, he's my presentation partner.
Yeah.
From LEAs, but we've served in very different roles. So Jacob, to me, is a professional development person. He's project management, whereas in the role that I served as a SPED administrator in an LEA, I have an assessment background. I'm a diagnostician, and I'm knowledgeable with curriculum and instruction and RTI and MTSS. So I think that it brings so many different perspectives to the table within our team, where we can look at the whole process from so many different lenses. And I think that lends itself to this wonderful system that we're rolling out this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So it just popped in my head. So I think I'm going to give you two a title, the dynamic duo. I just want to say, man, the two of you together, I know even in the information you shared with liaisons has been wonderful.
Hey, Ramonda, as I was listening, you mentioned targeted support. Could you explain exactly what that means?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at LEA's performance level, whether or not they are 0 or 1, which means that they meet requirements, if they receive a performance level of 2, they need assistance. Performance level 3 needs intervention, and then performance level 4 needs substantial intervention. We're really looking at the differentiated supports that we can provide or have connections to ESCs and other professional development opportunities and technical assistance that will assist LEAs with meeting their goals. So when we look at differentiated supports, we've actually kind of categorized it into 3 tiers. We have universal supports, which any LEA can access at any time, regardless of their performance level. We have targeted supports, again, where we're looking at those supports based upon your PBMAS information and your results-driven accountability data to provide those focused supports in those areas that have been identified as an indicator of need. And then we have intensive supports where we're really focusing on those performance level 3s and 4s, because then there are some indicators of need, but it takes it to a different level of intensity. So really trying to make sure that there's differentiated supports throughout the process that's going to meet every LEA's needs. So we have definitely identified that all supports aren't going to work for every LEA. So again, just really making sure that we're trying to meet the LEA's needs where they are and move them forward with that support that they really, really need.
Okay. Thank you. Jacob, you said you guys piloted this approach?
Yeah, we did. So last spring, between January and April, May, we actually engaged in a pilot project with our review and support process, and what's now the differentiated monitoring and support system. And so as part of that, we engaged with 8 partner LEAs that were really willing to be open and honest with us and help us see the strengths and then the areas where we still needed some work in our process and tools. But we actually, for each of those LEAs, we sent them a pre-pilot survey that was distributed to a wide variety of stakeholders in those respective LEAs, including general education teachers, special education teachers, parents of children with disabilities, administrators, and we actually had 1,352 responses to that survey. And what was really fascinating to us and really promising as we were reviewing that data was that 56% of those respondents were actually general education teachers.
That's great.
And overwhelmingly, when we asked them, our stakeholders, what is it that you need? And recognizing that many of these responses are general education teachers who are serving our kids with disabilities in their classrooms for a majority of their school day, they overwhelmingly said, we value the opportunity to have these children in our classes. We want to provide them with the highest quality education that we can. we want continued support and resources and training and professional development. And so as we took that feedback and continued building out our monitoring process, the differentiated monitoring and support system, that was really critical in thinking about just that importance of, after we engage with an LEA and go through monitoring activities, just getting them linked up with the right supports and making sure that we can get their teachers the resources and the knowledge that they need to be successful.
I think one thing is that in the past, we're so used to the word monitoring. District go through a monitoring process, be it the old DEC, be it PBMAS, whatever monitoring system. But I think what's new is what you just said, the supports that is no longer just being monitored, that there's now a system, there'll be a system in place that'll provide additional supports to the LEAs.
Yeah, definitely. So we definitely recognize, and as Ramonda had mentioned earlier, our team is unique, I think, here in the agency, in that every member of the review and support team has been a practitioner in the field of special education in some capacity. And so we all have that experience of having worked in the classroom as a teacher, worked in an LEA as an administrator. And so we recognize that when we as the state agency conduct review activities or monitoring activities, it can't end there. It can't just be a checklist of, hey, here's everything that we saw, now go back and fix this stuff. Right. We have to continue to partner with them, continue to engage, get them connected with the resources that they need to really see those changes happen for our children.
Yeah. So you mentioned in that research and in finding from the responses on the survey, having really a lot of feedback from gen ed teachers. And I think a lot of us get that out in the field that, of course we want all our kids and all our classes to be successful, and there's that need for support. So following up on that, I'd ask, what could you share with superintendents and with campus leaders, our principals, regarding how could they best focus their efforts to get the greatest impact? Like, because obviously we're all busy, we all have the constraints, we all have, but when you get into those leadership positions, the campus leaders and executive leadership, it takes on a whole new meaning when it says my calendar just won't permit, and so what can they do? Thinking about effective school framework. I know they're living in that world, and I see some overlap in what we're doing with that, some connection. And so how could they help us in support of really the self-assessment piece, the strategic support plan we want to create, really moving from compliance to outcomes?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ramonda, did you want to jump in on that?
When you're looking at campus administrators and, just being consumed with all of the different initiatives that occur in an LEA, I think one of the most important things that John and Pam, you guys have said this, is really just shifting that mindset. It's that shift from just focusing on monitoring efforts, but to addressing concerns such as equitable access and achievement gaps with our students. So with the time piece, really just kind of offering various varieties of opportunities for administrators to engage in ongoing learning opportunities. These different pieces, not necessarily just having to go physically to a place, but being able to access it, via a computer or some sort of mobile device. So providing different opportunities for them to access the information, but really just continuing the consistent messaging that we have to move from compliance, and we have to look at the art of balancing effective instruction and federal and state compliance. I think that's one of the biggest things that we could do, is just really change that mindset and just be charged with the task of prioritizing our district supports based upon between a balance of compliance and performance.
And I have a question about, y'all were talking about the pilot districts that you worked with. Do y'all have an ongoing relationship with them as you flush through all the different pieces? I mean, are they still piloting pieces, or was that just kind of to get the initial thing off the ground?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I mean, the commitment to the pilot project, obviously, that was a set period of time from January through May is when we completed the activities, and then June was when we collected the final survey. But what we really valued about the opportunity to engage with those LEAs is we did build really strong collaborative partnerships with them. And certainly we have continued to engage with them and reach out. And I feel like they have the same impression of the review teams that worked with them. We're here and we have, communication with them that I think they've reached out a couple of times with some follow-up, and similarly, we feel very comfortable if we want, or need some feedback on something, that we would feel like we could reach out to them and they'd be willing to provide that.
So I feel like what I'm hearing is that really there is, LEAs should expect more of a kind of a relationship from TEA versus visits when things aren't going right.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really great way of kind of framing it. We really value the opportunity to partner with LEAs. We want to be that collaborative partner with them, really understand what their goals and objectives are for continuous improvement, and how our efforts and obligations as the state regulatory agency can support them in achieving those goals. And that definitely is the feedback that we got from the pilot. I go back to just a piece of qualitative feedback that was shared, and out of everything that we collected in the survey, for me, this was the most valuable piece of feedback that came out of that. But this individual said, to the effect of that they felt like they had worked in education for, around 25 years and had experienced a variety of monitoring activities. And that in our pilot and working with us, they said this was a huge change, and they really felt like we worked as partners with them, and even said that they would welcome us back at any time. So I feel really good about that. I think our team feels really good about that. We had really good quantitative survey results, but to me, just that statement is very reflective of the work that we've been trying to do over the last year, and the approach that we want to continue to take moving forward.
I just wanted to kind of add to Jacob's comment. Being here in Region 4, which I love, yay Houston, it's so refreshing, where you could see at the beginning of this process, when we came in last year, the apprehension of LEAs to talk to us and work with us. And as we've gone through this previous year, you see those barriers falling down.
Yes.
You see directors and ESC staff members really wanting to meet with us and talk to us, and just being open and honest in the communication, and then us having the opportunity to be supportive and really provide some guidance and really working through problems. That is such a wonderful feat. And I think it's so positive, because it's going to actually help and impact our kids. And so for me, coming from an LEA to the state agency, I think that is one of the most positive things that I've seen over this year, are those barriers coming down and really being able to sit down at the table and problem solve and work together. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. I would think, I think sometimes, just from a district perspective, is that there's always been this mentality, us against them.
Mhm.
Us being the district, them being TEA. But
Yes.
with the lack of understanding that when the state is out of compliance with OSEP, that there's no us and them. It's, it's all of us,
Yeah.
Or it's the we now,
Yeah.
that we have to make a difference for kids receiving special education services, because Office of Special Ed Services in Washington, D.C. is not breaking it down to the us and them. It's Texas. And so therefore, as Texans who are serving students receiving special education services, then we have to be open to partnering with the agency to make that differences.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think the more you study, I know regulation, if you allow it to, depending on how you interpret it, always feels like it's someone doing something to you rather than you doing something on behalf of someone else. And so, it's that idea that you can't regulate morality. And, I've grown to understand that, the guidance that comes out of even, our federal government, when you really dig down into the ideals of IDEA, I think like if this was my child, do we not all want these things for our children? And then when you look at, when you really read the words and the guidance of the strategic plan and of the, aspirational and really very, very broad and far reaching with high expectations for our state and for our staff and for our kids. But don't we all want these things for our children? And so I think that what happens sometimes is we get stuck in the how and in the unknown. And then what happens is we turn inward instead of outward. And so to me, I always say, if you're not excited about education in Texas right now, if you're not excited about opportunities for students with disabilities and the things that are going on in Texas and the change, even though I know it seems constant right now, I think it probably is, but then maybe we shouldn't be in education, because for many years we've wanted different and we've wanted more and I feel like, hey, this is our time.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
I actually want to applaud. I don't know if that's appropriate right now.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh,
Yeah.
You truly applauded.
Standing ovation. No, I'm just kidding. Bless you, Ramonda.
Yes, I think that's such a powerful statement. At the end of the day, as a teacher, and actually until right now, I do it every day. I sit down and I ask myself, have I done everything that I would want someone else to do for my children?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If I ever answer no, then that means that it's time for me to move on and seek, other opportunities, because you have to be all in with this. And I think everyone in our division, from our Deputy Commissioner, Matt Montano, to our Associate Commissioner, Dr. Alexander, to everyone, all the managers and program specialists, we're excited about this, and we are all in because we really want to make a difference.
Well, and our commissioner, he visited our service center, and I was just highly impressed with just his dedication to our state, and also met with Matt Montano, and it was just to hear their heart in the work that they're doing was really exciting.
Absolutely.
Well, as we get close to the end here, I almost don't want to end this thing. Pam, can we just keep recording?
I think they want to go.
Oh, man. We promised.
They may have work to do, my friend.
We promised we would be cognizant of their time. But before we disband, right? Before we step away from the table, we always like to ask if there was a word that would capture your feelings, your thoughts, your perspectives on where we are, where your work is within the agency, where we are within the state, what's going on for students with disabilities in the classrooms. How would you? What word would that be? Ramonda, let's start with you.
Oh, that is a hard question. Hard question.
We ask the hard questions here on SPEDTalk.
I see. If right now, in this moment, the one word that would describe what I feel about my work and what we're doing, I would say hope. I have hope. I'm hopeful that we're going to make the games and provide our kids in the state of Texas what they need to be outstanding citizens in their adult life. I'm hopeful that we're on the right track to giving them what they deserve and what they need.
Great word. That's a great word.
Hope.
Absolutely.
Jacob, how about you?
Yeah, and it's hard to add on to that, but I would say the word I would choose is promise. And I think that, as we've kind of talked about, we have a really committed team. We've done some really great relationship building. I think we bring to the table, just as Ramonda said, this sense of hope and just recognizing the capacity for systems change and the positive impact that can have on our children with disabilities. It's promising. I think it shows a lot of potential. I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think continuing to work together, we're going to get there.
Okay. I have one question, still on kind of the same line. Working with special education directors across the state, kind of, what one word would you use for them? That was your personal. So let's think about the fact you have directors who engage in different monitoring systems, maybe apprehensive, or maybe thinking this too shall pass. So think about one word or two words. We're going to stretch this a little bit. Thank you. We're going to stretch. So what would be the words for, especially special education directors who sometimes feel like a lot of things get pushed on their plate, and they get very overwhelmed, and sometimes think no one really understands the work that they're doing. And so now we're rolling something new for them to, So anybody, Jacob or Ramonda, who wants to go first?
I'm gonna let Jacob take this one.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, and I know that we've used this word a few times this morning in our time together, but I would just say partnership. As we're approaching this coming year, our approach really is a partnership approach. We really want to work collaboratively with our special education directors. We understand the enormity of the tasks that they have in their LEAs and all the responsibilities that they have in serving their children with disabilities and compliance and outcomes. And we want to work with them on meeting those goals and helping them to achieve those results. We want to be those partners alongside them. We don't want to be putting things on top of those obligations. We want to be working in partnership with them.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of SPEDTalk and my colleagues here, we are so honored to have the time with you today. And Ramonda, now that I know that y'all take this show on the road, I'm going to invite you out. Listen now, I'm going to invite you out to Region 12. I do a Special Ed Leadership Academy out there with directors, and I would love for y'all to come in and share some of this fabulous information with them. So, hey, now that I know y'all take it on the road, I'm going to hit you up.
So I have a quote.
Duo can do that.
I like it.
Ramonda, I have a quote that you said, and I've heard you say it twice, and it's powerful. You said, where there is unity, there is strength. And so I wrote that down, and I just think that kind of sums up this conversation that we've had today. And I appreciate it. And you too, Jacob.
I really believe in that, and I really believe, like Jacob said, in the partnership with the LEA SPED directors. We want them to know that we're committed to this. We're in it with them. But one thing that we do have to recognize is change is inevitable.
Yes.
And so one of the quotes, another quote, obviously you see that I like quotes, right?
Right.
One of the quotes that I always talk about when I worked in the LEA, and even with my team now, we can't become what we need to be by remaining what we are.
Very
That's
good.
good.
That's
Yeah.
very
And
good.
so
Yeah.
our expectation is to change these programs for our kids. And even though change is hard and we don't want to do it, we do have to make this change. And it's going to be the change for the better.
Yes. Amen to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if we unify around our children, using that word unify, I think anything's possible. And I think the most important thing to remember is that they are all our children.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been a fabulous episode of SPED Talk. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ramonda.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.
Okay,
You
you
too.
too.
To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPED Talk.
And remember, courage creates culture and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam,
And I've been John.
and this is
SPED Talk.
Elevate the conversation
Living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
with